Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Natamba and I like to discuss difficult / uncomfortable topics. One of those topics today is beauty standards. What exactly are beauty standards? How do they differ between regions? And are they harmful or not? Well, let's get into it. I was reading Chimamanda Ngozi. What an interesting book. And it honestly got me thinking about how, beauty standards have shifted, how beauty standards are different in different regions, right? So first and foremost, let's talk about where they come from. So back in the day, before social media, when people were just still hunters and gatherers, what men would look for in women, and I'm gonna be talking about beauty standards in women particularly because I don't think men are held really like in chains when it comes to beauty standards. I think men are judged differently, mainly on their ability to provide, right? So women are mostly judged on their appearance. I'm just going to talk about women particularly, right? So back in the day, during the hunter-gatherer times, they would look at your waist to hip ratio. I think the number was like 1:2, right? So you can fact check that. So it was like a waist to hip ratio. Why was that important? Because as you know, when women mature, their hips tend to widen, and that is a sign that they can give birth. And during those times, women essentially would just stay at home and look after the children and make children, and then men would go out and hunt and gather food. So what women would look for in men is sort of someone who is able to run, someone who looks fit, and then men would look for women who have with hips, right? So that was what was considered attractive. If you are a woman and your hips started to show, you were essentially considered attractive, and someone would approach you and you would sort of get married, and that was great, right? And then times changed, right? Now we're moving away from hunter-gatherer times. People now have jobs. Food security is no longer a thing, especially in the West. So now we're moving away from that. We're moving away to other beauty standards. And as time changed, also these standards shifted across regions. Let's start with the West, right? Because the West was not really, especially European countries, were not really plagued by scarcity of food. They sort of looked at beauty standards in a different way, right? People who were skinnier, people who, had fair skin, people who had a chiseled jaw were considered attractive because that was what people in power looked like essentially. And there was a sign that you were disciplined, right? You're disciplined enough you have the resources, but you're disciplined enough not to just consume everything, right? So that was what's considered beauty standards in the Western countries. Light skin as well, like fair skin, because also everyone was just like light skin, so it was sort of normal. And then you move on to African countries. Now scarcity is a big thing in African countries, primarily because we have always had a higher population than European countries, especially back in the day. So food was sort of scarce. Now, if you had power, you had food and you had resources. So people who were more in power had bigger bodies and they were more fuller in their figures. So then they were considered attractive. That okay, someone who was big was considered wealthy and therefore attractive. So that was it. Power defined beauty standards, right? Great. And then colonialism came. When colonialism came, the West came to colonize African countries. And when they came here, they were obviously shocked. Why? Because we do not look like them. We do not behave like them. Our hair do not look like theirs. And they were now in power. So they imposed their beauty standards upon African people, right? So then now what's considered attractive was a fair skin. What's considered attractive was the way you look. What's considered attractive was your hair. You need to have straight hair, right? So then that's what was considered normal now for many, many years, right? This is not because being light skin is attractive. It's because having straight hair is more attractive. It's because being skin is attractive. It's because this is what the West was used to, and then they posed those ideas into African people. So then now, even when slavery ended, even colonialism ended, we still took these standards ourselves, right? In African countries, you start to see skin bleaching. People wanting to bleach their skin so that they look lighter because that's what is considered attractive, right? So that's one. And also people the weight hasn't changed. In fact, I think in African countries, the small waist, big hips is still there, but the main thing was that the hair and the complexion, right? So then now we have this introduction of hair relaxers. If you're from African countries or South Africa, you know what a dark and lovely hair relaxer is, or like the orange one. I forgot what it is. So now we're relaxing our hair until our scalps burnt because we needed to get our hair straight. And when you are doing it, you're not thinking of it in terms of, oh, I'm meeting a beauty standard that the West gave to me. No, you are doing it because everyone is doing it, and everyone is doing it because what's considered normal. Which is why I said there are social norms. What's considered normal because of what we were used to, right? So now we're bleaching our hair. I mean, we're relaxing our hair, we're bleaching our skin, and like it was a serious problem, right? And now fast forward to obviously where we are now, which is a beautiful time of globalization, of social media. We are seeing a variety of people. Not only that, people are more integrated now, so we get to see different people around us, and that will obviously normally change our perception or our ideas of what is considered attractive, right? So then now we're seeing a movement now in South African people who are just leaving their African hair out the way that it's supposed to be, which is great, right? Because now we don't have to burn our scalps. And you're seeing a lot of natural hair movements, which I love. I love watching those hair wash day videos, which you wouldn't see back in the day, by the way. This wasn't very common back in the day, this, products to treat African hair. And you're also seeing now what is considered attractive has shifted in terms of like social media and globally. Now there's sort of this of quote unquote mixed race people who are not just Caucasian. But even with that being said, even that those changes in specific regions, the beauty standards and norms do not change. We still have, if you go to African countries, you still have places where women with beards and who are slightly bigger considered attractive. And when you go to the West, people who are like, skinny blonde are considered attractive. So even though we are moving into a better place, we are not there yet. And so is this harmful? Are these beauty standards harmful? Well, yes, in a sense, right? Why? Because they start to, especially when they start to affect whether or not you get a promotion. In labor economics, I am an economist. I'm doing my master's in economics. In labor economics, we have what we call the beauty. I think it's a beauty premium, right? Which essentially says that people who are more attractive are considered more competent and more trustworthy, and therefore are promoted quicker and make more money in general than people who are considered not attractive. Now the issue is, what is considered attractive depends on the individual, right? And there's almost nothing you can do about the way that you look. That is problematic. That's one. And two, it was also highlighted in Americana where African or Black women sort of want to like straighten their hair before an interview, because there's this idea that if you go with your dreadlocks, if you go with like your afro, you're not gonna be considered professional, you're not gonna be considered competent, which is that is on its own a problem. If you just say, okay, you know what, I just like this type of person, no one can judge you, no one can say anything about that, so that's fine. But if it starts to affect whether or not people get jobs and how much money people make, then that starts to become a problem. Now, is there anything we can do about it? Well, the answer is not really, right? What you can do is you can sort of start to open your mind to it. Open your mind to the idea that what you might think is attractive and what people in your region might think is attractive is not what is considered attractive globally, right? And that alone, I think, is a move in the right direction. We don't have to solve anything. We don't have to fix anything. I'm very hopeful in us learning, but I'm very hopeless in us changing, right? So it's okay to just understand that beauty standards are different. People are different. People like different things, and that's just okay. And then you can always obviously like talk about it amongst your friends. It opens a dialogue, and a dialogue is always helpful in my view, right? Well, I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.